Welcome to the channel. My name is Lathan, and today I'm taking you through a detailed tour of my home lab. If you're new here, this channel is all about technology, engineering, and the systems I build to run my digital life. This video is one I've wanted to make for a long time because it shows the project that has shaped most of what I do behind the scenes. Before we dive into technical details, I want to give you a clear idea of what you're looking at. The setup behind me did not begin as a hobby or a random collection of parts. It grew slowly and intentionally because I wanted the systems I rely on every day to live here, inside my home, under my control. Over time, that choice pushed me to build something much larger than I expected. What started with one basic server eventually turned into a complete environment that behaves like a small data center. Everything I depend on runs through this lab. My storage, my media servers, my cameras, my automations, and even my network routing all operate inside this one space. At first glance, it may look complicated, but every device and every service has a purpose. Together, they form a unified platform that I maintain myself. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire journey. I will explain what a home lab actually is, how this project began, and how it grew into a cluster of servers working together. I will show you the hardware, the services, the storage, and the overall design that keeps everything running smoothly. By the end, you will understand why I built this system, what problems it solved for me, and why it has become one of the most meaningful engineering projects that I've worked on. Let's get into it. When people hear the term home lab, they picture a desk with a few computers sitting on it. A real home lab is nothing like that. A proper home lab is a controlled environment where you run your own servers, your own storage, and your own network services. It behaves like a small data center, except it sits inside your home and gives you full control over the systems you depend on. At the core, a home lab lets you break away from the long list of subscriptions that most people rely on. For example, most people stream everything through companies like Netflix, Disney+, HBO Max, Hulu, Prime Video, and all the new services that keep popping up. Instead of paying for them every month, I've built my own media platform with Plex. I paid for a Plex Pass one time and I own the entire system. My library loads instantly, I never see ads, and I'm not locked into monthly fees. It is the same idea with cloud storage. Most people pay for iCloud, Google One, OneDrive, and Dropbox to back up their photos and documents. In this home lab, I built my own cloud using TrueNAS and Nextcloud. My files, my photos, and my backups all stay inside my home on hardware that I own. There's no monthly subscription, no storage limits, and no company reading my data. Even my cameras are self-hosted. Instead of paying for Amazon Ring, Google Nest, Arlo, or any other that demands a subscription service, for basic video storage, I use Frigate. It processes my camera feeds locally and sends me alerts instantly and stores all my footage on my own servers. Nothing leaves my network unless I choose to send it out. A home lab also allows you to experiment in ways that a normal computer setup cannot. You can test operating systems, run virtual machines, redesign your network, automate your entire home, and handle your data the same way that a professional environment does. It becomes a place where you learn by doing and where every mistake teaches you something useful. This environment is built with that mindset. It is more than a stack of hardware. It is my cloud, my storage platform, my automation system, and the backbone for all of my media. Every service that I rely on runs inside this lab because I built it to replace the systems that companies normally charge you for. Once you understand that framework, the rest of the video makes sense. The hardware, the services, the storage design, and the network layout all connect back into one idea. Build an environment that gives you control, protects your data, and helps you grow your technical skills while solving real problems in your own home. When people look at a full home lab with multiple servers, storage pools, virtual machines, cameras, and automation, it is easy to assume that everything was planned from the beginning. That is not how this setup came together. It grew step by step because every stage fixed a problem that I ran into. The whole thing started when I had spare computer parts. I had enough parts lying around to build a second Windows 10 machine. and I thought that it would be a simple way to run Plex and store a few files. At the time, I even wanted to try Windows Server, but it wasn't free, so I had stuck with what I had. I plugged in some hard drives, created an SMB share, installed Plex, and called it a day. I even made a video on my channel showing that first NAS build. It worked for a while, but it was unstable. I ran into constant blue screens and random crashes. Every time Plex tried to do too much, the entire system struggled, and it was clear that Windows 10 was not built for the type of workload I was putting on it. That frustration pushed me into something better. That is when I switched to Proxmox. Switching to Proxmox changed everything. I installed it, created a small Ubuntu virtual machine, and suddenly I had a clean and reliable platform that could separate workloads instead of mixing everything together. Once I saw how easy it was to create virtual machines, take snapshots, and move things safely, I knew I was not going back to a regular operating system again. From there, the setup began growing quickly. I moved my storage into TrueNAS so I can use ZFS and have proper redundancy instead of juggling loose hard drives. I added Home Assistant, Nextcloud, and other services that I always wanted to experiment with, but could never run comfortably on Windows. As I kept adding more services, the network became the next bottleneck. A basic ISP router could not handle VLANs, traffic shaping, or the level of control that I needed. That pushed me into OpenWRT, with an internet connection and OPNsense for routing inside of the home. The moment I virtualized my router, I saw how much control I had over traffic and felt like I was running a real enterprise environment. At that point, I had one server, then two, and then eventually a cluster of nodes. Each node began taking on a specific role. One handled storage, another handled routing and core services, another managed monitoring and offloading strikes, tasks, and one handled Frigate and all of my cameras. Instead of one machine struggling to do everything, I now had multiple systems doing their jobs properly. This created stability, speed, and room to expand without rebuilding the entire setup each time. Looking back, this home lab did not appear overnight. It grew out of real problems and real limitations. I didn't plan to build a small data center, I simply kept improving things until each piece worked the way that I needed it to. After a few years, those improvements turned into a fully virtualized environment that runs my digital life today. That is how we got here. A steady chain of practical decisions, not an impulsive jump. Every part of this lab exists because it solved the problem and made the entire system more reliable and more capable. Now that you understand how this lab came together, I want to walk through the hardware that runs everything. This is where the full picture becomes clear. Every node has a purpose, every component solves a specific problem, and the entire setup works together like a small data center. I'll start with Proxmox Node 1. This is my main storage and media server. It runs the TrueNAS virtual machine that manages all of my ZFS pools, and the processor is an AMD Ryzen 5 3600. And the system has about 78 gigs of DDR4 memory. This machine also carries an RTX 3060 for Plex hardware transcoding. All of my data, it lives here, including Plex library, my documents, photos, my backups. This is the node that stays online at all times because losing it would impact everything. Node 2 handles my routing and at the core of my network. It has an Intel Core i9 with 8 cores and 15 gigs of memory. The system has several network cards so I can pass the physical ports directly to my OpenWRT and OPNsense virtual machines. One port handles the internet connection and the other manages the internal network. A third handles the VLAN traffic, which runs the DNS, DHCP, and firewall rules, and the routing stack that the entire home depends upon. Node 3 is my lightweight monitoring tool, and it uses an Intel N97 processor with 4 cores and 11 gigs of memory. It has Nextcloud, Monet, and other smaller services that I run consistently without using a ton of power. It also has a direct path to my ISP router, which gives me a way back into the network even if my main routing setup goes offline. Node 4 is dedicated to security cameras. It also has a Ryzen 5 3600 with 32 gigs of memory. It carries another 3060 that I use for video processing and Frigate. All of the object detection, motion analysis, and recording takes place here without relying on cloud systems or monthly subscriptions. Node 5 is my experimental machine. It also has a Ryzen 5 3600 with about 8 gigs of RAM, along with a GTX 1650. This node is where I test new virtual machines, containers, and anything I do not want to risk on the main cluster. Alongside these 5 nodes, I also rely on an off-site system in my parents' house. It's a Dell Optiplex 390 and a Dell Wyse 3040 with an Intel Atom processor. This system stays online to provide remote Tailscale access and to monitor my home connection from the outside network. If anything goes offline, it alerts me immediately. From here, we can look at the network that ties this home together. A home lab is only as strong as the network, so I built mine with enterprise-style structure and clear separation. The main switching backbone begins with the Ubiquiti standard 24 switch, which is a 24-port managed switch, and it handles most of the wired distribution in my house. For high-speed links, I use the Ubiquiti USW Flex 2.5 gig 8-port switch, and this switch gives me 2.5 gigabit connections to devices that need more bandwidth, including my gaming PC and some of the Proxmox links. For wireless access, it's powered by the U6 access point, and it provides strong coverage across the house and clean support for multiple VLANs. For devices that need power and network access in one cable, I have a UNLE 8-port PoE switch. It feeds to power my cameras and smaller devices that don't have their own adapters. The routing flow is simple. Internet enters through the OpenWRT, moves to OPNsense for routing and firewall control, then travels between the Ubiquiti switches and reaches each device assigned on a VLAN. For my VLANs, I use VLAN 5 for my main devices, 15 for servers, 25 for media devices, 45 for IoT, and 70 for cameras. This structure keeps the traffic organized and prevents devices from crossing into areas they shouldn't reach. All of this forms the backbone of my home lab. Every service, every file, and every automation, and every camera feeds depends on these nodes working together as one unified system. Now that the hardware is clear, the next step is to look at the services that run on top of it. Let us take a look at the major services that form the foundation of this home lab. These are the systems that hold my data, deliver my media, and allow me to manage everything from anywhere. I'll begin with Tailscale. This is my backbone of my remote access. Tailscale creates a private encrypted network across my devices so I can reach my servers from about anywhere in the world without opening a single port to the internet. One of my strongest parts of my setup is the subnet router I placed at my parents' house. That system gives me a direct path into their network and also monitors my home connection. If my internet ever goes down, the remote Tailscale node notices immediately and sends me an alert. At the same time, I can still reach servers through the Tailscale mesh even when my main router is offline. This gives a reliable and secure access no matter where I am. Next is Plex. Plex is my main media platform and it connects directly to my TrueNAS storage. The RTX 3060 in Node 1 handles hardware transcoding, and because of all the media states inside my network, everything loads instantly. I don't rely on any streaming subscriptions because I have full control over my own library with no monthly fees. Now I want to focus on TrueNAS because this is the real heart of my data. I run TrueNAS on Node 1 and Node 4, and each system has ZFS for protection and reliability. I named the pools after locations from Hollow Knight, which makes the layout a little easier to follow and a bit more personal. On Node 1, I have 4 separate storage pools. The first is GreePath, which uses a mere 2 4TB drives. This gives me fast, redundant storage for the important files. The second pool is Hollow Knight, which is built using 6 6TB SAS drives from RAID Z2. These are enterprise-grade IBM Seagate drives, which I picked up from eBay. I bought all 6 for a great price from a sellers called Drives for Less. They arrived in perfect condition with 100% health. With Z2, I can lose Z2 drives without losing any data, and this pool holds the bulk of my Plex library along with a long-term storage. The third pool on Node 1 is Hornet, which is a single 12TB SAS drive. This is another enterprise-grade drive that I bought on eBay from someone in Montreal. This gives me a lot of space for non-critical storage. The fourth pool is Dirtmouth, which is a 256GB external solid-state drive which I connected via USB-C. I use it as a scratch disk and for a temporary workspace. Node 1 uses a SAS controller to control all of these drives. It lets me run multiple enterprise disks at full speed and gives me the room to scale the system as it grows. On Node 4, I run 2 additional pools. The first is DeepNAS, which uses 3 2TB drives in RAID Z1, which protects from one drive failure, and it mainly stores camera footage from Frigate. The second pool is Bone Bottom, which is a single 2TB drive used for the overflow or temporary files. Putting all of this together gives me a large amount of reliable storage without paying for any cloud subscriptions. All my media and my documents, school files, photos, and backups live inside the ZFS pools for redundancy and integrity checking. It operates the same way an enterprise storage does, but at a fraction of the cost because I've used smart eBay deals and enterprise SaaS hardware. Another major service in my home lab is Frigate. This is how my camera system runs entirely on my own hardware with no cloud services involved. Frigate handles real-time object detection, motion analysis, and recording for all of my real-link cameras. It runs on a Proxmox Node 4 with the Ryzen 5 2600 and a 3060 for video processing. Because the detection happens locally, events appear instantly. I don't have to wait for crowded servers and don't pay any fees, and none of the footage leaves my network. Frigate lets me tune my every camera, and I can set detection nodes, adjust sensitivity, and add and cut down on false alerts from things like trees or headlights. All these recordings go on the TrueNAS pools on Node 4, and they never mix with my main storage. This is a fast, reliable camera system that behaves like a commercial NVR, except I built it myself and I control every part of it. The next area to focus on is Home Assistant because it's the system that holds everything together in my home lab. It's one of the most important tools I use, and it connects directly to my engineering work and this video. Home Assistant brings all of my devices into one platform. It manages automation, collects sensor data, builds dashboards, and gives me a complete view of how my home behaves at any moment. Environmental monitoring setup runs through ESP Home on ESP32 boards. Each board has its own configuration and connects to Home Assistant over Wi-Fi. This gives me a simple and reliable way to track the conditions of each room without relying on cloud services. Everything updates instantly and values appear right away on my dashboard. For temperature and humidity, I use DH22 sensors. I built about 5 of these custom sensor boards and placed them across my home. One is in the kitchen, one in the computer room, one in the bedroom, one in the living room, and one inside my server cabinet. Each device sends temperature, humidity, and single strength to Home Assistant, which lets me compare every room at any time. The server cabinet sensor is especially important. It shows me how warm each cabinet is getting and how warm each cabinet gets as the servers run. If the temperature runs past a certain limit that I sent, Home Assistant alerts me right away. This protects the hard drives and keeps Proxmox nodes from overheating. Built in each sensor was simple. I connect the data pin on the DH22 to a GPIO pin on the ESP32. The 3.3 volt line powers the sensor, and the ground pin completes the circuit. After wiring everything, I flash ESP Home on the board and add my settings and connect to my IoT Wi-Fi network. Once the board comes online, I pair it with Home Assistant and begins reporting immediately. These sensors help me understand the air moves through my home. I have 4x10 register vents on the main floor, and the temperature changes to show how the vents affect each space. Over time, the readings will reveal which rooms warm up quickly and which ones stay cooler during the day. All of this shows on a custom dashboard and mounted in my kitchen, and display shows the temperature and the humidity in every room, plus the status of the server cabinet. It also includes graphs that track how the values change with weather, HVAC cycles, and daily activity. Anyone in the house can check on it at a quick glance. It replaces separate thermometers and removes the need for multiple apps. Home Assistant also allows me to create useful automations. I can trigger alerts when the room becomes too warm or too cold, flag abnormal humidity levels, and detect a sudden spike that might point to a failing sensor or ventilation issue. The system works on its own, so I never have to check it manually. This setup works well because ESP Home and the ESP32 boards and Home Assistant all integrate smoothly. I control the hardware, the software, the data, and nothing leaves my network. Nothing depends on a cloud company, and this gives me privacy, stability, and a hands-on way to apply real engineering concepts inside my Home Assistant turns the home lab into more than a rack of servers. It actively helps me run the house, understand the environment, and keep my equipment safe. For a project like this, it is one of the most practical and rewarding systems that I have built. It makes sense to explore to go through the minor services that run my home lab. These systems may not be as large or complex as Plex or TrueNAS, but everything runs smoothly and they make the entire environment feel complete. Let's start with the Unify controller. This manages my Unify access points and gives me visibility into my wireless network. I can see every device that it connects to, and the signal strength, the bandwidth use, and the overall health of the network. It also lets me push updates and change settings without touching the access point physically. Next is Obico. This is my remote management system for my 3D printer. It lets me monitor prints, check camera feeds, and receive alarms if anything fails. It also keeps track of print time and gives me an easy way to manage long prints without setting beside the printer. For media automation, I use Prowler, Sonar, and Radar. These services work together to monitor releases, download content, sort it, rename it, and place it directly into the right location on TrueNAS. It's all automatic, so I don't have to track anything manually. New content just appears in Plex ready to play. Pi-hole handles my DNS filtering. It blocks ads, trackers, and unwanted domains across every device in the home. This improves my privacy and performance and doesn't require any configuration on any of the individual devices. Everything is filtered at the network level. Tatuli monitors Plex activity. It shows play history, bandwidth, device information, and overall performance. This helps me keep the system optimized and makes it easy to track heavy usage times or detect issues before users notice anything. I also run Nginx for website hosting. It gives me a simple and flexible way to serve pages directly from my home network without relying on outside platforms. Right now, I host 2 websites through it. First is my personal portfolio, which lets me showcase my projects and home lab work, and the second is a network monitoring site that displays real-time information about my devices, my services, and the overall health of my system. Hosting both sites keeps everything fast, private, and fully under my control. Finally, I have a Nextcloud instance in progress. When it's fully set up, it will replace my cloud storages like Google Drive and iCloud. All of my documents, schoolwork, photos, and backups will sync through my own servers instead of through companies that charge monthly fees. This will give me full control over my personal files from anywhere. These managed services fill all the gaps. They manage automation, improve privacy, support printing, handle wireless networking, monitor media usage, and host internal tours. They are small individually, but together they make the home lab feel complete and polished. As the home lab grows, there are several upgrades and improvements that I want to focus on next. Nothing in my setup is meant to stay the way it is forever. A home lab evolves as your needs change, and every upgrade brings the entire system closer to the final visual in mind. One of the biggest improvements I want to make is moving every machine into a rack. Right now, I use a mix of open test bed cases and temporary setups. They work, but they take a lot of space and they make the environment harder to manage. A proper rack will organize hardware, improve airflow, and make cabinet cable management cleaner, and create a space that behaves like a real data center instead of a collection of scattered systems. It would also make maintenance way easier because everything will sit in a structured location. Another change is the storage consolidation. At the moment, my drives are split across 2 nodes, and many of them are older SATA disks with smaller capacities. The plan is to move towards a larger enterprise SAS drives with full redundancy and to replace them all in one dedicated TrueNAS system with multiple SAS logs. This will simplify the layout, increase reliability, and give me far more room to expand as my storage needs grow. Network upgrades are also on the list. I already use 10 gigabit links for part of the cluster, but the wiring in the house is still running on Cat 5e. Moving to Cat 6 will improve stability, reduce interference, and future-proof the network. I also want to upgrade the network cards on all nodes so each machine can run at either 2.5 gigabit or 10 gigabit connections. This will speed up the file transfers, VM migrations, and overall responsiveness across the entire lab. I also want to expand Home Assistant with new sensors. Temperature and humidity monitoring is already in place, but the next step is room presence and occupancy detection. Adding motion sensors will help me automate lighting, airflow, and energy usage, and even on smaller day-to-day tasks. Over time, this will make the house smarter and more comfortable while giving me more data to analyze. All of these upgrades move the home lab closer to a unified, polished, and more fully optimized system. None of them are urgent, but they are long-term goals that will make the environment cleaner, faster, and easier to maintain. And that brings us to the end of this tour. You have seen what a home lab is, how mine was built, and the hardware behind it, and the services that keep everything running. When you look at everything at the full picture, this is more than a set of computers. It is a personal data center that supports everything I do. I built this setup to learn, to take control of my own systems, and to push myself beyond what I could do with off-the-shelf platforms. It taught me more about networking, storage, virtualization, and automation than any classroom ever could. And the best part is that it will keep growing. There are new sensors to add, new upgrades to build, and new ideas that will take the project even further. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, subscribe, and follow along because there's a lot more coming. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next one.